Welcome, dear friend, and a quiet word of thanks for choosing to wander with us for a while into the heart of this gentle story. It is our fondest wish that the soft cadence of these words and the tranquil world they seek to paint might serve as a soothing stream to carry you softly towards the peaceful shores of deepest rest, allowing the cares of the day to simply drift away, as light and airy as dandelion seeds on a warm summer afternoon, before you settle completely, allowing the story to gently enfold you like the softest of well-loved blankets. Might we quietly suggest, if this tale brings you a little comfort and ease, that a simple tap to like this story, or perhaps to subscribe to our small haven of peaceful narratives, would be a most appreciated kindness. It does so help others who may also be seeking such a quiet moment to find their way to these gentle shores. And now, with a soft exhalation, let us begin our journey to those sun-warmed cliffs where ancient stones hum with tranquil energy. Chapter 1. The Whispering Approach. The path Kaelen followed was less a deliberate construction and more a suggestion worn into the land by time and the quiet tread of infrequent visitors. It meandered away from the last vestiges of the bustling world he knew, a world of sharp edges and clashing sounds, towards something hushed and ancient. He carried little, a simple satchel with provisions, his now silent lute wrapped carefully in soft cloth, and the heavy weight of weariness that seemed to settle deep within his bones. The stories of the Sunstone Cliffs, dismissed by many as folklore, had called to him whispers of a place where stones sang to the wind, offering not music as he understood it, but a profound, healing quietude. He hoped, with a fragile sort of yearning, the whispers were true. The air began to change subtly as he walked deeper into the rolling hill country that guarded the approach to the fabled cliffs. It grew warmer, not with the harsh heat of a midday sun, but with a gentle, pervasive warmth that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The scents shifted too. Gone was the damp tang of the lower forests, replaced by the dry, sweet perfume of sun-baked soil, wild thyme crushed underfoot, and the unfamiliar fragrance of distant, unseen wildflowers carried on the soft breeze. This breeze, Kaelen noticed, seemed to have a quality of gentleness he hadn't experienced before. It touched his face like a soft sigh, rustling the long grasses beside the path without urgency. He paused, sitting on a smooth, moss-covered boulder warmed by the ambient light. The moss was thick and velvety beneath his hand, a deep, comforting green. He closed his eyes, focusing on the sounds around him. It wasn't silence, not truly, but a different quality of sound. Birdsong, which in the city often felt frantic or territorial, here sounded melodic, almost contemplative. The buzz of insects was a low, steady drone, part of the landscape's gentle hum rather than an intrusion. Even the rustle of leaves seemed softer, less like a chatter and more like a whispered secret passing between the trees. Kaelen unwrapped his lute, not to play, but simply to hold the familiar weight of it. The wood felt cool in the warm air. He ran his fingers lightly over the strings, but stopped before making a sound. For years, music had been his refuge and his burden. He had sought complexity, technical perfection, the roar of applause. Now, the thought of adding his own notes to this delicate tapestry of sound felt almost sacrilegious. He wrapped the instrument again, a strange mix of relief and melancholy washing over him. Perhaps, he thought, the healing wasn't in making music, but in learning to truly hear it, or perhaps to hear the spaces between the sounds. The path began a slow, steady ascent. The trees thinned, replaced by hardy shrubs clinging to rockier ground. The earth beneath his feet transitioned from soft loam to fine, warm gravel that crunched ever so softly. Ahead, hazy in the golden distance, he could begin to make out the towering forms of the cliffs. They seemed immense, ancient structures of amber and ochre rock, radiating a quiet strength. Even from this distance, he fancied he could feel the warmth intensifying, a gentle pressure against his skin, like standing near a hearth fire on a cool evening. He found a small spring bubbling almost silently from a fissure in a rock face. The water was cool and clear, tasting purely of minerals and earth. He drank deeply, then splashed the water on his face and neck. It felt refreshing against the background warmth. Looking around, he noticed the plants here seemed particularly vibrant, their leaves a rich green, their small bell-shaped flowers turned towards the distant cliffs as if listening. A sense of anticipation, gentle and hopeful, began to bloom within him, pushing aside the weariness. As the light began to soften towards what might elsewhere be called evening, though here the golden radiance seemed perpetual, Kaelen found a sheltered spot nestled between large, warm boulders. He laid out his simple bedroll, the ground still radiating a comfortable heat. The air remained mild, the breeze a soft caress. He ate a simple meal of bread and dried fruit, the familiar tastes grounding him in this unfamiliar landscape. The silence deepened, punctuated only by the soft sigh of the wind and the occasional distant call of a night bird. Lying back, Kaelen looked up, expecting stars, but the sky here wasn't dark. It held a soft, luminous quality, a deep twilight blue that never fully yielded to blackness. There were no stars visible, only the gentle, ambient glow that seemed to emanate from the direction of the cliffs. He felt his body relaxing, the tension that had been a constant companion for so long beginning to unwind, thread by thread. The warmth beneath him, the soft air around him, the profound quiet it was, like being held. He closed his eyes, not thinking of sleep just yet, but simply allowing himself to be in this place, feeling the first tentative whispers of peace settling over him like the gentlest of blankets. The approach itself felt like a form of healing, a gradual shedding of the noise he carried within. Chapter 2. Arrival at Amber Rise. The final part of the journey unfolded the next morning, though morning felt like an inadequate word in this land of perpetual, gentle light. Kaelen awoke feeling more rested than he had in months, the warmth from the ground having seeped into him through the night. He packed his few belongings, the simple actions feeling deliberate and calm in the quiet air. As he crested the final rise, the full majesty of the Sunstone Cliffs unfurled before him, and he stopped, simply breathing in the sight. They soared upwards, vast and ancient, their surfaces a tapestry of warm golds, rich ambers, and soft ochres, catching the unending light. Embedded within the rock face, like colossal jewels, were the sunstones themselves, smooth, rounded formations, some radiating a soft internal glow, pulsing faintly like sleeping hearts. The air here was thick with warmth and a palpable low-frequency hum. It wasn't a sound heard with the ears so much as felt within the chest, a gentle vibration that seemed to resonate with the very marrow of his bones. It was profoundly calming, like the deep purr of some enormous, benevolent creature. The base of the cliffs, known as Amber Rise according to the old maps, was a wide, relatively flat area covered in fine golden sand and dotted with clusters of resilient sun-loving plants with waxy leaves and bright star-shaped flowers he didn't recognize. The scent of warm stone and faint sweet floral notes hung in the air. It was near one of these clusters of unfamiliar flora that he saw her. She moved with a quiet grace that seemed perfectly attuned to the rhythm of the place, tending to the plants with gentle, deliberate movements. She was older, her face lined like a sun-dried map, her silver hair tied back simply. She wore plain, earth-toned clothes, and her bare feet rested easily on the warm sand. She looked up as he approached, her eyes clear and calm, holding no surprise, only a quiet welcome. This, Kaelen knew instinctively, must be Maeve, the guardian spoken of in the hushed tales of the cliffs. He offered a small, hesitant bow, murmuring a greeting. Maeve responded not with words, but with slight inclination of her head and a gesture towards a smooth, flat rock nearby. An invitation to sit. Kaelen did so, feeling the pleasant warmth of the stone through his trousers. Maeve returned to her gardening, her movements fluid and unhurried. There was no awkwardness in the silence, no pressure to speak. It felt natural, companionable, as if words were unnecessary adornments in this place, ruled by warmth and vibration. He watched her work, her hands moving deftly among the plants, loosening the sandy soil around their roots, removing a dried leaf here and there. Some of the mosses growing at the base of the rocks seemed to glow with a faint internal light, similar to the sunstones above. Maeve touched them lightly, as if exchanging a silent greeting. Kaelen felt his own urgency, the habitual need to do something, begin to fade, replaced by a simple contentment in observing. The rhythmic hum of the cliffs seemed to encourage this stillness. After a time, Maeve finished her tending. She approached Kaelen and offered him a small woven cup filled with cool water. It tasted sweet and clean, much like the spring water he had found earlier. She then gestured towards the cliffs, a slow sweep of her hand encompassing the vast rock faces and the embedded sunstones. Her expression was serene, inviting him simply to look, to feel. He gazed upwards, tracing the intricate patterns of the rock, noticing the subtle variations in color and texture, the way the light seemed to cling to the surfaces. The sunstones pulsed gently, their light waxing and waning almost imperceptibly. He became aware of the breeze again, noticing how it seemed to interact with the cliffs. As it flowed across the rock face, the underlying hum shifted slightly in pitch and intensity, creating subtle, ever-changing harmonic overtones. It wasn't music in the conventional sense, no distinct melody or rhythm, but rather a living, breathing tapestry of sound and vibration, constantly weaving itself anew. It was the sound of warmth, of light, of ancient stone breathing in rhythm with the air. Maeve sat near him, not on the rock, but directly on the warm sand, her eyes closed, a faint smile on her lips. She seemed utterly at peace, a part of the landscape itself. Kaelen tried to emulate her, closing his eyes, focusing on the warmth penetrating his body, the gentle hum vibrating within his chest, the soft touch of the breeze on his skin. The cacophony that usually filled his mind, fragments of melodies, worries, remembered conversations began to recede, like ripples smoothing out on a still pond. He wasn't empty, but filled with something else, the profound, simple presence of Amber Rise. He had arrived, not just physically, but perhaps somewhere deeper within himself as well. Chapter 3. Listening to the Light. The days at Amber Rise unfolded with a gentle rhythm dictated by the unchanging light and the subtle cues of the environment. There was no clock, no schedule, only the slow passage of awareness. Maeve proved to be a guide of profound quietude. Her instructions were rarely verbal. Instead, she would lead by example, gesturing for Kaelen to join her as she sat near a particularly resonant cluster of sunstones low on the cliff face, or indicating with a nod a specific patch of glowing moss that seemed to respond vibrantly to the ambient hum. She taught him not through explanation, but through shared presence. Kaelen's initial instinct was to analyze, to deconstruct the sounds, to try and understand the mechanics of the Sunstone Melodies. As he would a piece of music, he'd strain his ears, trying to isolate frequencies, to discern patterns, but this effort only brought back a shadow of his old restlessness. Maeve seemed to sense this. One afternoon, finding him frowning in concentration, she gently placed a hand over his heart, then gestured outwards towards the cliffs and the warm air, a simple movement that conveyed everything. Listen here, feel it, not with the ears alone, but with the entire body, the entire being. He began to practice this different way of listening. He would find a comfortable spot on the warm sand or lean back against a smooth, sun-warmed boulder, consciously relaxing his shoulders, softening his gaze. He focused on the physical sensation of the hum, letting it vibrate through him without trying to interpret it. He paid attention to the feeling of the perpetual warmth on his skin, sinking deep into his muscles, loosening knots of tension he hadn't even realized he carried. He watched the slow, mesmerizing dance of light and shadow as the gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the cliff plants. He noticed the wildlife at Amber Rise seemed uniquely attuned to this environment. Small, sand-colored lizards would bask motionless on the rocks for hours, seemingly absorbing the warmth and vibrations. Birds with feathers the color of honey nested in crevices high on the cliffs, their calls infrequent and melodic, blending seamlessly with the stone's hum. Even the insects seemed to move with a certain slowness, their buzzing a soft counterpoint to the deeper resonance. There was an overwhelming sense of peace, of everything existing in its right place, in perfect harmony with the gentle energy of the cliffs. Maeve showed him how to tend her garden of glowing mosses and unusual, sun-loving succulents. The work was simple, meditative, clearing away fallen pebbles, gently watering the plants with water carried from a hidden seep higher up the cliff, carefully cultivating the soil which felt warm and alive beneath his fingertips. The mosses pulsed with a soft internal light, brightening slightly when touched, or when the sunstone hum seemed to swell with a stronger breeze. Kaelen found a quiet satisfaction in these simple tasks, a connection to the living energy of the place that required no complex thought, only gentle attention. Sometimes he would simply sit and trace the intricate, time-worn patterns on the surface of the lower sunstones. They were warm to the touch, smoother than the surrounding rock, almost like polished river stones. He imagined the centuries of sunlight and wind that had shaped them, filled them with this quiet energy. He felt the subtle vibration traveling from the stone into his palm, up his arm, a direct connection to the heart of the cliffs. He wasn't just hearing the melody anymore. He was feeling it, becoming part of its resonance. He started leaving his lute wrapped in its cloth. The desire to play, to add his own voice, had vanished completely. It felt like trying to shout in a library. Instead, he found himself becoming more receptive, more open. He began to perceive finer nuances in the sunstone hum, subtle shifts in tone that corresponded with the time of day, though day never ended, the strength of the breeze, perhaps even the presence of certain birds or clouds drifting far overhead in the perpetually lit sky. It was a language spoken not in words or notes, but in pure vibration, in warmth, in light. One afternoon, sitting with Maeve near a patch of softly glowing sun lilies, Kaelen realized his mind was quieter than it had been in years. The constant internal chatter, the anxieties, the restless striving, they hadn't been forced out, but had simply dissolved, like mist in the warm, golden light. There was just the warmth, the hum, the scent of the flowers, the peaceful presence of Maeve beside him. He wasn't listening to the light, he realized. He was listening from a place of light, a place of stillness the cliffs were helping him uncover within himself. Chapter 4. Harmonies Found Within. The distinction between days blurred into a continuous, gentle flow of time, marked only by Kaelen's growing sense of inner quiet. The restless energy that had propelled him here, the musician's constant urge to create, to perform, to be heard, had subsided, replaced by a profound appreciation for simply receiving. The harmonies of the Sunstone Cliffs weren't asking for interpretation or addition. They were offering a state of being, an invitation into resonance. Kaelen began to accept this invitation more fully, letting go of the need to understand and simply allowing himself to feel. He found deep contentment in the simple rhythms Maeve followed. Together they would walk the smooth stone paths at the base of the cliffs, their bare feet enjoying the comforting warmth radiating from the ground. Maeve would occasionally stop, pointing out a tiny, resilient flower pushing through a crack in the rock, or the way the light caught the edge of a particularly bright sunstone high above. These moments were unspoken lessons in observation, in appreciating the small, quiet wonders of this unique place. The pervasive warmth felt like a constant, gentle embrace, encouraging his muscles to remain soft and relaxed. Kaelen spent hours tending the garden alongside Maeve. He learned the names she silently gave the plants sun whispers for the tall, feathery grasses that swayed in the breeze, glow hearts for the plump, light-emitting mosses, amber tears for the succulents that held water droplets like tiny jewels. His hands grew accustomed to the feel of the warm, sandy soil, the smooth leaves, the slightly rough texture of the mosses. This gentle labor grounded him, connecting him physically to the nurturing energy of the cliffs. He felt the low hum of the sunstones, not just in the air, but seemingly traveling up from the earth through the soles of his feet, a steadying, peaceful vibration. One day, Maeve led him to a shallow cave tucked behind a curtain of hanging vines, whose leaves shimmered faintly. Inside, the air was slightly cooler, but still held the pervasive warmth. The hum of the sunstones was softer here, more muffled, creating an atmosphere of deep tranquility. Smooth, hollowed-out depressions in the cave floor suggested Maeve use this space for rest. She gestured for him to lie down in one. As he settled onto the cool, smooth stone, the gentle vibrations felt different, more focused, seeming to penetrate deeper. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his body fully supported, a profound sense of security washing over him. Lying there in the quiet coolness, Kaelen's mind drifted, not into anxious thought, but into a state of relaxed awareness. Memories surfaced, not sharp or demanding, but gentle images floating by like leaves on a slow stream, the complex patterns of notes he used to strive for, the faces in audiences, the jarring sounds of the city. He observed them without attachment, noticing the tension they once held compared to the deep ease he felt now. He realized the harmony he had sought wasn't in louder music or more intricate melodies, but in the subtraction of noise, in the alignment with a deeper, quieter rhythm, the rhythm of the Sunstones, the rhythm of his own peaceful breath. He began to notice the subtle interplay between the external environment and his internal state. When he felt particularly calm, the hum of the stones seemed clearer, more resonant. If a flicker of old restlessness passed through him, the air felt subtly heavier. It wasn't judgment, just a reflection. The cliffs were like a mirror, showing him his own inner landscape through the medium of vibration and warmth. This understanding brought not pressure, but a gentle awareness, a quiet encouragement towards equilibrium. He spent less time actively listening and more time simply being. Whether walking, gardening, or sitting quietly, he allowed warmth and the hum to be the backdrop to his awareness. He watched the unchanging light paint the cliffs in subtly shifting shades of gold and amber, observed the slow growth of the plants, felt the soft breeze against his skin. He found a simple, profound joy in these sensory experiences, uncluttered by the need for meaning or purpose beyond their own existence. The music he sought wasn't in performance, but in presence. Maeve, observing his deepening calm, offered a small, knowing smile one afternoon as they sat together watching the warm air shimmer above the rocks. No words were exchanged, but Kaelen felt a sense of shared understanding, of having been gently guided not to a destination, but to a way of traveling within himself. The harmonies he was finding were not just in the stones or the air, but echoing softly within the quiet spaces that were opening up inside him. The Sunstone Cliffs hadn't given him something new. They had helped him uncover the peace that was already there, buried beneath the noise. Chapter 5. Resonance and Return. Time and the gentle constancy of amber rise lost its sharp edges. Kaelen couldn't say if weeks or months had passed since his arrival. What mattered was the profound shift within him. The anxious static that had once filled his mind had quieted, replaced by a calm resonance that mirrored the steady hum of the sunstones. The deep weariness he had carried for so long had been replaced by a sense of gentle vitality, nurtured by the perpetual warmth and the restorative vibrations of the cliffs. He moved with an ease he hadn't known before, his steps light on the warm paths, his breathing slow and even. He understood now that the gift of the Sunstone Cliffs wasn't a melody to be learned or a magic to be wielded, but an environment that facilitated profound inner listening. Maeve, with her quiet presence and gentle guidance, had simply held the space for him to attune himself to the harmony that was always present, both in the cliffs and within himself. The Sunstones didn't impose peace. They resonated with the potential for peace within anyone who came seeking it with an open heart. The feeling of warmth became synonymous with safety and release, the gentle hum a lullaby for the restless mind. One day, sitting alone near the glowing moss garden, Kaelen felt a subtle internal shift. It wasn't a thought, but a quiet knowing. It was time, not an ending, but a transition. He hadn't mastered the Sunstone Melodies or completed his healing, because those weren't the right words. He had simply reached a state of equilibrium, a quiet hum within his own being that felt self-sustaining. The cliffs had been a sanctuary, a tuning fork, and now he felt ready to carry that resonance within him back into the world. He found Maeve sitting peacefully near the base of a large, warmly glowing sunstone, her eyes closed. He sat near her, allowing the comfortable silence to stretch between them. After a long while, he spoke. his voice soft, unused to forming many words. "I believe it is time for me to leave, Maeve." She opened her eyes, her gaze calm and understanding. There was no sadness, only acceptance. She reached out and gently placed a smooth, warm pebble, no bigger than his thumb, into his palm. It pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth and vibration, a tiny piece of the cliff's resonance. He held the stone, feeling its familiar comfort. "Thank you," he whispered, the words encompassing everything: her guidance, her patience, the gift of this place. Maeve simply nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. She then gestured towards the path leading away from Amber Rise, a silent blessing for his journey. There were no prolonged farewells, no promises to return, only a shared moment of peaceful understanding. Kaelen gathered his few belongings. He paused before wrapping his lute, running his hand over the smooth wood. He felt no urge to play, but also no aversion. It was simply an instrument, a tool, no longer burdened by his expectations or anxieties. He secured it carefully, then shouldered his satchel. He took one last long look at the magnificent cliffs, bathed in their eternal golden light, felt the familiar warmth on his skin, heard the deep, gentle hum vibrating in the air. He imprinted the sensation onto his memory, onto his very being. Walking away from Amber Rise felt different than arriving. He wasn't fleeing noise anymore. He was carrying quietude. The path felt welcoming, the air still warm and gentle. He held the small sunstone pebble in his hand, its faint vibration a comforting reminder, a connection back to the peace he had found. He knew the world beyond would be louder, faster, more demanding, but something fundamental had shifted within him. He had learned to listen beneath the surface noise, to find the deeper, quieter rhythms. As the Sunstone Cliffs receded behind him, their light softening in the distance, Kaelen didn't feel loss, but gratitude. He carried the warmth within his bones, the gentle hum within his heart. He knew he could recall the feeling of sitting by the glowing mosses, the sensation of the warm stone beneath him, the peaceful presence of Maeve. The Sunstone Melodies weren't just in the cliffs anymore. They were a part of him now, a resonance he could return to, wherever his path might lead. The journey hadn't just been to the cliffs, but back to himself.